Hi, I'm Pastor Dave with Declaration Church. And today, as I was preparing for this video, I was thinking a lot about an injury that I suffered years ago. I was in a car accident. I was sitting in the back seat. Somebody hit the car we were in. It was a really nasty car accident. We all ended up going to the ER and just all kinds of things. And nobody really suffered any life-threatening injuries, which was awesome. Okay, for the most part, we all walked away. But I ended up having to have 2 surgeries on my left arm because of this accident. I had one on my wrist and I had one on my elbow because my biceps tendon got torn in the accident. Just mostly across there, scarred over a number of times, but I had to have surgery to repair it because it just wasn't functioning properly anymore. And so now I know that I compensate for a lack of motion, for a lack of range of motion with my arm and my wrist and different things, because now I can't turn my hand down very far, not like this. On the other side, this is about as far as I can go. I only get about 15, 20 degrees, whereas this one I can go a full 90 degrees. So I'm losing some range of motion, and so I know that I compensate for that. And in life, when we go through traumatic experiences, when we have difficult times, when we face some situations in life, we end up injured in some way. Sometimes it's mentally, sometimes it's emotionally, sometimes it's physically, sometimes it's all three, sometimes it's spiritually, sometimes we're just absolutely devastated by a situation that we encounter. And when those things happen, we tend to need a little time to recover. We need time to reassess, to reprogram ourselves, to recover from the injury and begin to function again in some way. And yet, in most cases, what I found is we're limited in the amount of recovery we can have. We start to suffer through these kinds of things, and then we start to compensate for a loss somewhere along the line. And we just kind of try to move forward with that injury. And it doesn't have to be physical. Like I said, it could be any part of our lives or a combination of different areas of our person that are injured through the process. And it causes us to go through life really with some kind of a limp. And I came across this verse and this word just jumped out at me. It just jumped out at me because I believe in life, especially before we meet Jesus, we encounter these situations and then we just go through life trying to compensate for all of the injuries that we've suffered. We have to compensate for the loss of something in our life every single day. And so I came across this verse in Matthew chapter 20, this passage. It's 3 verses really, 32, 33, 34. Matthew chapter 20, verses 32 through 34. And it's Jesus' encounter with 2 blind men on the road. And so Jesus is walking down the road and these men start shouting because they hear that Jesus is coming by and they want his attention. They want his help. And it says this in verse 32. Stopping, Jesus called them and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus could have just ignored them. He could have just kept going. A lot of us, I think, sometimes encounter somebody who's going through a difficult time and they're not somebody we really know. And so we just move on. We pretend they're not there. We just kind of think, what can I do? And we move on. Jesus doesn't. He stops. And he says, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." So these two men are blind. They can't see. And they want to regain their sight. They want to be able to see. And Jesus, in pity, touched their eyes. And immediately they recovered their sight and followed him. They recovered their sight and followed him. That word recovered just jumped out at me. It says so much because in life, we do face difficult circumstances. We do face crippling things where we begin to have to compensate for the loss of something somewhere, something emotionally, something mentally, something spiritually, something physically, where we're just really struggling. And in many cases, spiritually, when we encounter these kinds of things, we begin to shut down as people. We lose our ability to see spiritually, to hear spiritually. We lose our ability to move forward spiritually. And then Jesus comes along. And we have a choice to make. Are we going to admit that we are blind just like these men were? Spiritually blind, unable to see the things that as they really are, unable to see things accurately. Are we going to be able to admit that we are short-handed, we are missing something, we are limping through life in some way, and we need Jesus' help? Are we willing to make that admission? And that's the challenge for you and I today. Are you in a position, am I in a position right now where I would rather try to cover something up and compensate for it than admit that I'm struggling somewhere? Because if we don't admit that we have an issue, we can't have it resolved. We can never fully recover. But these men, they recognize that. They are more than willing to shout at the top of their lungs, even in the face of a crowd of people telling them to shut up, in order to get the help that they need. And are you and I, in our society, in our lives, in the situations that we're facing today, willing, if we're in a similar situation where we are weakened, where we are hurt, where we are struggling, are we willing to admit that to get the help that we need? Crying out to God, crying out to those around us for help. Are we willing to do that? Because a lot of times it's only through those situations, being willing to admit that we're struggling, that we can actually get the help we need to recover. So that we don't have to cover something up and compensate for a weakness going forward. Instead, we can move forward in strength because we have recovered. You know, after those surgeries, I was able to lift more. I was able to function better. You know, before the surgery, I was holding my young son in my left hand, and at times my arm would just start to drop, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I could not keep my arm up to hold him, and I would have to quickly switch hands so that I didn't drop him. But now, you know, I can hold a lot with that hand because I've recovered from that injury, because I went and I sought the help that I needed. And that's what we need to do spiritually in life. We need to come to Jesus. We need to admit our weakness so that he can bring the healing and the recovery that we need so that we can move forward in strength again. So that we move forward not on our own strength, really, but in his strength. And that's the encouragement for us today, that we can find hope and encouragement and strength to move forward. We can recover from so many of the injuries that we face in life as long as we come to Jesus and admit that we need help. And so I want to encourage you to do that today. Admit where you're weak, admit where you're struggling, admit where you've been hurt so that you can get the recovery and the help and the healing and the health that you need so that you can recover and you can move forward with that clear vision, with that new strength, with that renewed life and vigor that's been missing. And you don't have to compensate anymore and pretend like everything's okay. So if this video has been encouraging to you, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Smash the like button. If it's been a challenge to you, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel so that you and I can continue to walk through the scripture together and grow together as disciples of Jesus. Thank you so much for allowing me today to just be a part of your journey with Jesus. And I hope that you and I can continue to walk together as we go forward. You just subscribe to the channel and continue to work through this process with me. Thank you so much. As always, I'm Pastor David, and I'm out.